Hello, this is Karina from the future. If you're listening to this episode, I just wanted to give a disclaimer that I am outside in the freezing cold and my battery for my podcast recorder for my microphone died. So you might see a dip in the quality of this audio throughout this episode, and I'm very sorry about that. I promise that the quality will be a lot more consistent in other episodes moving forward. I'm just in extraneous circumstances. Regardless, I hope that you enjoy today's episode about the appeal of the dark feminine energy lately. Enjoy! Hello and welcome back to the Changing Room Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Karina, and we're in a bit of an interesting location. If you've been watching me for some time, you'll know that I usually record out of a different podcast studio, but I'm currently on vacation right now. I'm in the Italian Alps, I guess. It's called the Dolomites. I've been skiing for the last week. It's been amazing. Got a kidney infection, which is not so cute, but I'm making the most of it. And I did want to show you a little bit of what I've been up to in the last week. If you're new here, Changing Room Thoughts is a podcast for anyone who has ever had a critical thought about clothes. The next few episodes are going to be solo episodes like this, which may be in varying locations because the podcast studio is completely booked up. Honestly, I kind of miss doing solo episodes. I feel like I can get a little bit deeper into a topic. It seems like the kind of podcast episode where I can be more like, in this essay, I will. And I miss that. I feel like I can connect with you guys a little bit better when I'm doing a solo episode and they're a little bit shorter. Speaking of getting into it, I've really enjoyed reading all of your comments, enjoyed engaging with you guys at events like when we went to the Met Gala and went through the Costume Institute's exhibit on women dressing women. Our community is pretty engaged, which I'm pretty proud of, but to give us a better place to actually facilitate discussions, because I feel like some of the podcast episodes really kind of incites debate, discussion, examples, links, articles, etc. And I'd love to get a better understanding of what kind of podcast episodes you guys want to see in the future. I started a Discord channel. So if you want to join the Discord server, the link is going to be in the description box. And if you're someone who wants to meet like-minded people who are also interested in the intersection of fashion style with other intellectual pursuits like economics, art, culture, technology, sustainability, etc., I highly recommend you join and give us a little intro of who you are. Today's episode is actually inspired by a comment left by a listener on our episode around the Spring Couture Week review. If you haven't watched that video, we talked a little bit about the rise of darker aesthetics. I've been seeing more of a resurgence of this kind of idea. And Rachel Koo 2000 writes, what you talked about today about feminism and why the villainous and hyper-feminine aesthetics are rising together was super interesting. Would love an episode talking more about that. Okay, so I don't know about you, but lately I've really been enjoying dressing a little bit more like a witch. Like these earrings, I love wearing these kind of dark, I call it like dark Catholic core earrings, and they match with this kind of more gothic style necklace. I've been enjoying wearing a lot more black, just enjoying kind of feeling like a witch, a grandma. I'll put up some pictures. But lately I've had more of a fascination with dressing in a darker, more witchy, villainess way. And I don't think I'm alone. I think female anti-heroes have been trending a little bit. For example, fans speculating about Miley Cyrus in her petty post-divorce comeback era in her Flowers music video. In particular, I think about Anya Taylor-Joy's interview where she was talking about her role in The Menu, where she attacked her boyfriend and like was so viscerally angry and violent. And she had this iconic quote about how there's something men don't understand about feminine rage. While doing some research on this topic about this resurgence or surgence of feminine anger and villainy and the attraction that women have to that, I came across this excellent article in the Brown Daily Herald by Emily Tom, breaking down why feminine rage has such a chokehold on pop culture lately, and I'll paraphrase from her. TikTok and YouTube are saturated with compilations of angry woman characters. Carrie unleashing the curse of blood at prom, Megan Fox seducing, attacking, and eating men in Jennifer's Body. These examples work to show that women are just as capable of brutality as men. And by circulating clips of these women, often with kaleidoscopic filters and a girl boss Lizzo anthem in the background, the internet validates our love for feminine rage by making anger fashionable. The most obvious reason we crave feminine rage is its subversion of gendered connotations of violence. Women are most often passive characters, or worse, victims. There is something that draws people towards women in agony. We can't look away. We can't stop imagining new ways for them to hurt. When our culture has spent so long infatuated with female suffering, we should not be surprised by the surging popularity of female rage. If a woman hurts someone on screen, women in the audience will at least be relieved that for once they are not the ones being hurt. This subversion of expectations is enough to feel like progress. Snaps to her. Emily Tom 8 on that explanation. I feel like the way the world has been going has been trending more and more conservatively. The whole traditional value things is coming back, kind of that sort of extremism online. I feel like how that has translated into fashion has been very interesting. I think the response to this much conservatism and patriarchy and traditional values that have come resurging lately has manifested in one of two ways within fashion. One, which is the very girly bows, girl aesthetic, the very Sandy Lang, the very Shu Shu Tong, the very ladybird-like aesthetic. And as my friend Salome, who has a wonderful Substack and talks about this called Apollo's a Girl, Salome had pointed out that maybe the reason why all of these girly aesthetics are so in right now is because it takes women back to a time where they weren't aware of the patriarchy and they could just be comfortable being women. And I think that's pretty spot on. Like, there's something so nostalgic, so comfy, so like cozy hug about seeing these bows everywhere on everyone and everything, and it feels like you can be safe to be feminine and girly and a woman. But the unsettling truth within that is that I'm not a little girl. Like, I think the reason why the bowification, ballet core of everything hasn't really stuck with me personally is because I don't want to feel like a little girl. I don't want to believe that I peaked when I was like 7, you know what I mean? And I think the other direction in response to this conservatism, the direction that I've gone with is, instead of being a innocent, pure little girl who doesn't know any better, I'd rather be like a scary old woman. I'd rather be like a terrifying, angry, evil woman, like a witch or a sorceress or a siren or, something scary. Like, I'd rather not regress into a little girl as a response. I'd rather either be feared or be powerful or just not even care or be above it or something like that. That's the root of the appeal of Villainesses to me, is that these are powerful women who threaten the ideals behind a patriarchal society. And that sounds really liberating. Like, that sounds great. I think that's also why you're seeing like mob wife happening at the same time. Yeah, I don't want to believe that my current existence as a grown woman isn't one I feel comfortable growing into. That as long as I keep getting older, the more I am, the more undesirable I am. Like, I want to get to a point where, okay, so I'm old and wrinkly and undesirable. Who gives a f***? One of my favorite accounts to follow is called Advanced Style. And Advanced Style is a series of interviews of women in their later stages in life who have incredible personal style. And that is my favorite source of inspiration because they are past the point of giving a fuck about the male gaze. Like, there's also been this discussion online headed by Old Loser in Brooklyn about the debate around like Issey Miyake's please, like, oh, but it's not flattering. And the new way of thinking about clothes is like, okay, who cares if it's flattering? Like, I just like it. I just like the way that it makes me feel. I like the art behind it. I like the culture. So who gives a f- if it's unflattering? Like, okay. Yeah, so scary old women are badass. And they also have better fashion, which is why we have mob wife, why we have advanced style. But something that my friend pointed out that I think is also an interesting discussion. While you can interpret female villainy as empowering and subverting the male gaze and standing up against the patriarchy, you can also see it being sexualized. Like, there are sexy witches, there are sirens which seduce men, and sorceresses, like, there is something also sort of sexualized about them as well. While dark aesthetics are associated with villainy, they also have some kind of association with undeniable sex appeal. I struggled with this for a little bit because I think it is sort of true. While I wanted to think of sirens and witches and evil women as subverting the male gaze, like, they're also kind of part of the male gaze. So then does that undermine their worth to me as an aesthetic? Like, again, if you're following, I'm the kind of person that overthinks about fashion. So if you're lost already, bear with me. Yeah, I actually struggled with this idea a lot personally about, can you be an empowered woman while also being a sexy or sexual woman? So to share a bit of a personal story, I took this quiz once about Jungian archetypes, which is a field of psychology that was founded by Carl Jung, who studied archetypes, subconscious themes that would pop up in cultures around the world that were not connected together. So it's all about, like, teasing out your collective subconscious. I took this quiz about Jungian archetypes that focused on female or feminine archetypes. And this was on the website Women Love Power by Aisha K. Faines. I think there's a lot of, like, different permutations of this subject and different people who have made their own, like, feminine archetype quizzes. But there are several archetypes like the lover, the queen, the mystic, the huntress. I remember really wanting to be the sage, like the wise woman, because I thought that it would be most useful in career and business. It's what I've kind of internalized all my life to care about above all else, whether or not it's good. I'm working through that in therapy. But I remember being ultimately disappointed when my personality test results came back and I was the siren, which is, quote, unbridled erotic energy in its purest form. I remember thinking, great, so my superpower is that I'm a slut. It took me completely by surprise because that's not at all how I saw myself or how I wanted to see myself. But because I didn't understand it, I decided to pay $80 and take, like, this online course to learn more about myself, which was offered by Women Love Power. And it completely changed my life. I'm not trying to sound like I'm part of a cult or anything, but this course dove into the research behind the archetype, like the development of this archetype, which focused on folklore and mythology that was shared across different cultures, from African cultures, South American cultures, indigenous cultures, and like Greek mythology, and basically teased out common themes about female power in a sense. And I realized I had a completely internalized, like, patriarchy view on the matter because I had associated so much, like, shame around being considered a siren. One point that really spoke to me is the story of sirens in Greek mythology. Sirens were a threat to sailors in Greek mythology because they would sing to a man's greatest desire and seduce him onto the shore, where these vulture-like creatures would, I think, like, devour them in some way, something fatalistic, period. But ultimately, the point of that story is to show that the power of seduction that women can have is so strong that whole tales were made to warn Greek sailors. I realized that the shame around being a sexual woman is more a result of men's insecurity of their weaknesses around strong women, as opposed to there actually being anything to be ashamed about when it comes to being sexy. I think the same goes for the sexualization of villainesses. So what if they're sexy? Like, a woman isn't allowed to be powerful, angry, and attractive. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts around the idea of villainy, the female gaze, the male gaze. Because at the end of the day, I think, like, there's no escaping any of it, and we should just let women be and just let them exist. Yeah, I think about this kind of stuff a lot, inevitably, because feminism and fashion have a lot to do with each other, given that fashion has been so gendered for so long, so it's a bit inevitable that the two intersect. I also took a class in my undergrad called Introduction to Feminism, and it was life-changing. As part of that class, we kind of touched on this also, that there are sort of 4 tropes that people tend to classify women as: the prude, Virgin Mary, the woman who protects her purity and innocence at all costs, the mother, the woman who's constantly nagging and fussing, the seductress, which is like this evil woman who causes problems in relationships and infidelity. And I think the last one was like the old hag or something like that. I feel like I've talked a lot about female anti-heroes and villainy and the appeal of like an evil or angry woman, but I also think that there is a lot of appeal around that old hag trope, like the old woman trope. I kind of mentioned this a bit with advanced style, but I think an old woman is viewed so differently between the male gaze and the female gaze. The male gaze sees an old hag as like completely undesirable, kind of irrelevant. But I think from the female gaze, for me, I have so much veneration around older women because to me, they seem incredibly wise. Like, there's a saying in Chinese called 过来人, which means a person who has come from afar, pretty much. And that's what older women are to me. I'm talking like elderly, like grandmas. I talked about this a bit during the event that me and my friend Alan held at the Met, where we went through the Women Dressing Women exhibit together. But one of my muses has always been my grandmother, because she was not only complete matriarch, boss woman, like she was really good at like real estate. She had 4 kids. She drastically changed the trajectory of her family's well-being because she was an incredibly smart lady, and her opinion and authority was paramount above all else in this family. And the way she dressed also commanded that kind of respect. Like, she was always well dressed. You never saw her without a pair of like thick opaque stockings. She always had a little block heel on. She always had her makeup done, her jewelry. She made a point to collect and pass down fine jewelry. That's kind of like a tradition, I think, in Asian families. And she's seen a lot. She's been through a war. The way she dresses, like, obviously is not for the male gaze, but she still dresses so nice. Why, right? Like, there's some reason behind that. There's some kind of empowerment that she must feel through it. And I think that that's really fascinating. So sometimes I find myself sort of dressing like her, wearing like a big long skirt, a little kitten heel, my glasses, pearls, you know? And somehow I feel like that's also a bit of like a collective memory. I remember listening to Law Roach's podcast episode with Emily Ratajkowski, and how his entry point into this major interest in fashion was dressing up with his grandmother to go to church on Sundays, and like him picking out the pearls and everything. So I think old women, especially for the female gaze, are major inspirations and should be celebrated. So now that we've kind of talked up through the feminism theory behind the appeal of villainesses, old ladies, especially to women, I want to talk about some of my favorite dark aesthetic collections and designers. I think the aesthetic that appeals to me the most, and I don't know if this is because my grandmother is Catholic, but is this sort of Catholic core vibe. Like these earrings, for example, they're very dark, ornate, and romantic, I think are the 3 words I would use to describe. So I think of like Elena Velez. She has these incredibly sort of like late 18th century shapes in her latest collection, with, you know, sort of like a bustle feeling and lots of ruffles. But even though there's nothing like explicitly, there's this undercurrent of like subversion and dark feminine energy about her collections that I just really resonate with. Another one that I think of is some Mirror Palais. When I was talking through the cherry girl trend, I had pointed out how Mirror Palais is particularly cherry girl because there's some sort of dark feminine energy around the cherry girl where they're a little bit more promiscuous, they're a little bit more tortured soul, they're a little bit more Lana Del Rey, whereas a strawberry girl is very Lyrica Matoshi, New Jeans, Sandy Lang kind of girl, and there's just this undercurrent about that. Okay, the next collection that gave me this feeling of dark feminine energy was the Alaia ready-to-wear collection, most recent. Pieter, I forget his last name, Pieter, he's done like a really impressive job with that collection where everything was made of merino wool, but a lot of it looked like fur. And I just love the way that he cut the shapes. It was very Cruella de Vil, who's a huge like villainess aesthetic inspiration for me. But I just love how mob wife, for lack of a better term, mob wife that collection is. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode and deep dive on dark feminine aesthetics, villainy, old women, and all of that good stuff. If you want to talk about it more, please consider joining the Discord server that's linked in the description below. Hopefully I'll see you guys there. If not, I'll see you next Monday. Bye!